Good morning, everyone. Did you have a great night yesterday? I see from your enthusiasm that it was a great night and you're still recovering. So that's awesome. All right. So what I want to ask you is to now gather your strength because this is actually going to be a tough subject to talk about. It's quite difficult for me. So I think it will require, all the mental strength. I divided the presentation into two parts. Here we go. The part number one is why even the subject of future of work, the subject of autonomy, of this decision making put in hands of the workers is on top of the minds now. That's the topic number one. And the part two is basically about what we can do to bring about this future faster. Like what is on us, okay? So this is my presentation. So, and before we start, I want to ask you a couple of questions just to find out where we are right now in this group. So if you right now are working in an organization that you consider to be a flat organization, could you please raise your hand? 6 people. Wow, we have some. That's awesome. Okay, so another question to you. If you, right now, are working for an organization that gives you more autonomy than an organization that you worked for 10 years ago, please raise your hand. Excellent, there's more. And another question to validate my hypothesis. If you think that you right now work for an organization that gives you more autonomy than your parents had when they worked for some organization when they were your age, please raise your hand. Excellent, wow, okay. So, what it means is, it illustrates progress. So we've made progress, essentially, that organizations are giving more autonomy and more decision-making into the hands of employees than before. Why? So, in my mind, there are 3 main reasons. Reason number 1 is the pace of change. And I like to illustrate it with an example that really blows my mind. So 1903 is the year of the birthday of the oldest living person on Earth right now. And now take this into account. This person's birthday is closer to Napoleon Bonaparte than to present day. Okay? In the lifetime of that person, humankind discovered penicillin, went through 2 world wars, discovered atomic energy, landed human on the moon, air travel became ubiquitous, and we have those devices, all of us, that we can contact almost anybody anywhere on Earth instantaneously, right? All in one person's lifetime. Okay, the pace of change is unprecedented. So that's one reason. The other 2 reasons that I like to bundle together is increasing complexity and ambiguity of our work. So basically, the projects that we are working on right now are more complex than ever. They require more materials, more thoughts, more people, and ambiguity means that the goals and the constraints that we face every day are not as clear as in the past. This basically means that we need to make decisions every day, taking into account various goals and constraints that in the past, could be delegated up towards the hierarchy and we could wait for an answer. Right now, we make so many of those decisions that if we waited, our competitors would basically be ahead of us. We can't do that. I'll give you an example from my work in an internet media company. So basically I worked on a website that was for user in the user-generated content space, and we had 2 conflicting goals. One was to create the greatest possible product for the users to view, search, and create content. The other one was to create greatest possible product for advertisers to basically introduce their products to the users. And those were in conflict because, if you wanted to serve advertisers, we could just make, entire website of advertisement and that's it. But that would mean that the users don't have anything. But then if we gave everything, all the real estate of the website to the users, then we wouldn't have money to run the service. And those little decisions, are made every day by the employees. And that's the ambiguity. And so now we know why and that we have moved. You showed it, you proved it with your show of hands that we have moved toward the more autonomy. But still there is a contradiction because the companies are saying, yes, we want more power in the hands of workers, empowerment, autonomy, decision making, right? But let me tell you about my experience from this year. So I left my previous job and a few months afterwards, I was interviewing for a leadership position in many companies across Europe and in US. And all of them espouse that, yes, we empower our teams, yes, they make all the decisions and so on. And during all of the interviews, all of them, they asked me the same question. And the question was, what is the biggest decision you made? They wanted to know that I was responsible for making a huge decision. And so I asked, okay, are you interested in the kind of decisions that I facilitated with my team? The kind of decisions that I participated in making and influence making as a part of an executive team in the company? No. What they were interested in the decisions that I made personally for the organization that had huge impact. And do you see the contradiction? Because I do. On one hand, they said that they want to empower teams. On the other, they expected executives to make a lot of decisions. And so you now see that there is a contradiction and a problem in our organizations that even though they say they want one thing, they actually do another thing. And so that's the first part of my presentation. And the second part of my presentation is, okay, what kind of things are important for every one of us to do and to employ so that we don't behave like those people that interviewed me, so that we actually do what we say we want, so that we make our organizations more autonomous and more decision in the hands of the workers. All right, first one, incredibly important, and without it, nothing else that I say matters. For me, it's responsibility. So what we need to do is to put us as the subject of our story. It means that we need to take responsibility for the change in how we, our team, and our organization operates. And what it means in practice, I'll give you specific examples, is we need to get rid our language and our thoughts more significantly of the words like should and have to. So please think, how many times have you used in a conversation with a colleague a phrase like, he should do X, like, my manager should give us more money to do more load testing on AWS. Or, I have to do this because, I was asked to, someone forces us, the process prescribes me, right? No, it's not true. You don't have to do anything. You want to do it or you choose to do it. And start saying that. I choose to do it because I believe that the process in my organization makes sense, or I believe that overall my organization has good processes. This one I don't believe it, but I choose to do it because I believe in my organization in general. And if you have to say, someone should do something, you need to go and approach them and say, listen, based on my knowledge, this is what I believe it's worth doing. Like, it is worth investing in more AWS computing power for better load testing. And have this conversation. Become an agent and a subject in your own story. I'll give you an example from my yesterday conversation. Like in the evening, which was very interesting, and it's exactly about this. So there is an organization that is growing, and software engineers started asking, okay, we want personal feedback. Okay, so they expect the organization to put together a framework or a process for them to get personal feedback. And it's puzzling to me, because if they embrace responsibility, what they need to do is to go to their colleagues, people they work with, and say, listen, I want to grow, I want to develop myself, and I want you to provide me with honest, unabridged feedback. What do you think I do well? What do you think I can improve? Very simple. Doesn't take a lot of time. What it does take is courage and embracing responsibility. Okay? And once again, if we don't do that, nothing else that I say in this presentation matters. Okay? Second one, and this one is actually the most difficult concept that I'm going to present. And it's actually also difficult for me to explain, is interdependence. And I struggled with it, I was puzzled by the behavior of people around me for a big chunk of my career, until basically I understood, or it dawned on me like a couple of years ago maybe only, how important interdependence is and how little of it there is in current organizations. I'll start with an example. So I talked to software engineers, I talked to team leaders and scrum masters, and many of them said the things like, we're doing Scrum, but we're not doing stand-ups anymore. And I asked, okay, so if you're not doing stand-up, how do you achieve the goals that stand-ups in the Scrum process are supposed to achieve? Well, we just found out that we don't use stand-up, they're not useful for anything. Okay, so do you know what stand-ups are supposed to do in Scrum? No, I don't. Okay, so here's the thing. Most people assume that stand-ups in Scrums are to report to manager. This is what I've done yesterday, this is what I'm going to do today. That is a reporting mechanism. So it's not what they are in Scrum, but the effect that it had on the teams is this. Basically, the teams divided their tasks. They took the task from Jira, and all the sprint, what they were interested in, the people on the team, they were interested in implementing their own tasks. They didn't care whether the goal of the sprint was achieved. They didn't care what other people on the team were struggling with, right? And stand-ups are for synchronization in the team, for the team. Like if I am struggling with a task, I estimated it, I made a mistake because it became apparent that it's much more difficult, I need help, this is what they are for. I need to ask for this help during stand-up, right? Or I need to find out that if I help someone else, we achieve the goal. Yes, I won't do my task, but maybe it's lower priority, right? But I will help our team achieve the goal. And that's something that's not happening in our software engineering team. In many teams, I talked to many team leaders and software engineers. And that's what interdependence is about. It's either we win together or we lose together. And the thing that I struggled with was because like I had intuitive understanding of it. When I was little, you know, like these boys, I was playing soccer for 11 years professionally. So I had a practice every day and a game every weekend. And it didn't matter that a person scored 3 goals for us if we lost a game. We were all going sad to the changing room if we lost a game. And that's how our teams and our organizations need to operate, and that's how we need to think about them. It doesn't matter that we closed our task faster than anybody else. Who cares if we didn't achieve the value for our customers and for our users? And there's another aspect of it. I want to share a personal story. So in one of the previous companies, I worked with a leader of the product team. And I struggled how to work with him. And my struggle was that I wanted to talk about why we're doing certain products and why we're putting focus on certain things rather than other things, right? He was very defensive. He never wanted to engage in a conversation with me. And so I started to talk to him about our relationship instead, right? Like what it is that, how I annoy him, how we cannot have an honest conversation. And he said, do you trust me that I make the best decisions for our product. And I thought, like, really, that's your question? Like, that's a very loaded question, because it's not about my trust in his intentions. I trust his intentions. What I want is an honest conversation about what kind of things he assumes, what these assumptions are based for, what kind of data support those assumptions, how we want to check it, and how we want to move forward, so that I and my team, engineering team, also have confidence that we're choosing the right path. I don't always have to agree with his judgment or with his assumptions, but I want to understand them, and we want to work together, and I want to be able to challenge his assumptions. I want him to be able to challenge my assumptions. For example, when I proposed, okay, it's time we moved from monolithy to microservices, a few years ago, I want him to challenge that. I want to challenge this on the business case basis and whether it's actually useful for our users, right? And I need to be able to, like, make my points, make my assumptions public, and him to be able to say, well, this makes sense, this doesn't, and this is the data that I'm looking at, right? Interdependence, trust, joint ownership. So one of the things that I also noticed, and it's especially like in my new job, is very visible, is that people assume that either they can completely own something 100%, or that someone else owns it, and maybe they will answer some questions if they are asked, but they don't care, right? And this shows especially in the relationships in a hierarchical organization between like team lead and the next level manager. Whenever like the next level manager asks some questions or want to get better understanding, the team lead says, oh, it's micromanagement, go away. And for me, it's puzzling, because you have this person that has a lot of experience, that went through many projects, he's in this position for a reason, and you're not using it. You're not having a conversation. And so I don't know where it comes from, this like inability to share a project and do it together, but it's observable. In my opinion, it's not how we need to operate in order to be in a flat organization or in an autonomous or self-organizing team. We need to be able to share our projects with other people. It's very simple. Okay, there's alright, so these are the main points I wanted to make about it, and the two main points. Let me maybe just okay, and in order to do those two things, so to embrace responsibility and to embrace interdependence, there's a couple of skills that I believe are useful, and I'm going just to talk about those skills that are needed. So one is we need to learn how to communicate with other people, and this means negotiation, this means influence, this means integrity. And I'll give you an example. So I was running a group about negotiation with a group of managers, and there was a young manager, just became a manager, and he had a case that he wanted to convince an employee of making a presentation of what this engineer did to larger organization. The manager basically believed that the work that he's done is going to be useful for many other teams, and he wanted those other teams to learn about it so that they can, just use it. And the engineer didn't want to do a presentation, right? And so we went through this case, and it was obvious that he doesn't know, this young manager, how to talk about this subject, right? And one of the advice from the group was, well, at some point, you just need to tell him to do it. And then this young manager acted, but I don't want to use power. I don't want to tell people. I want to convince them that it's useful, right? And that's a great attitude of that young manager, but he couldn't get what he needed in that way because he didn't have the skills. So I encourage you to learn communication negotiation. I'm going to just give you one tip. In this particular case, the mistake that this manager was doing was he didn't describe the problem as clearly as I did. So he didn't say why he wants this engineer to make this presentation. He didn't say, you know, you got this amazing piece of work that other teams would find useful, right? So let's share it. And he didn't say what kind of ways you think you can achieve it, because then maybe the engineer would say, oh, I'll write a blog about it, right? And that's a good solution too, right? So start with a problem definition. That's my one tip on negotiation, and I won't go deeper into this topic. And you will get 90% of your influence cases done much, much faster. Of course, be open to solutions different than the one you have in mind. As you know, like I suggested, instead of making a presentation, writing a blog, same thing, same result, it's good. Okay? Cool. The other one that we need to learn is the specific things about teamwork. So how to leverage our teams. And this is something that I said there is interdependence in the teams, and that the teams are currently working very individualistically. So it means that people take their tasks, they deliver them by the end of the sprint, job done. So what we don't do is we don't tap into other people's strengths. So there is a strength in different abilities, different skills that different people on the team have. And what I encourage you to do is to learn the strengths and weaknesses of your own, learn strengths and weaknesses of your teammates, and use them, right? So the simplest example is, again from my life, is we had a lot of creative people in the company, right? And what they were able to do is to generate many feature ideas that would basically make the product better for our users. What they struggled with was actually finishing this project, making them polished, making them really work, making them scalable, right? So imagine that if that person would do projects on their own, our website will be proliferated with half-finished features. And you can see that some of the websites or some of the products act like that. There are half-finished features there. And that's a sign that basically there was someone in charge who was creative, who wanted to try different things, but didn't know how to finish projects. And so they can team up with a person like me, who is very strict about, you know, like schedules, planning, knows how to deliver the end result, definition of done, and so on. And we can work greatly together, or we can fight, right? Because we can, like, I can tell him, how stupid, you're just starting fifth idea when we didn't finish first one, right? I could do that, or I could say, listen, I have those strengths, you have those strengths, let's use them together. That's one thing that I encourage you to learn. The other thing is about decision making. And this is where especially teams with flat structures, autonomous teams, can struggle. Because they, for example, may think that they need to make decisions by consensus. And this couldn't be farther from the truth, because that's not how effective decision-making works, because people are going to have different outlooks on life and on things, and reaching consensus will be very difficult. So, what do you do instead is, first of all, if you know the strengths and weaknesses of the teammates, you can basically say, okay, I think differently, but this is your strength area. Like, you know Node.js best of all of us. This decision is connected to Node.js. We're going with that, right? So that's one potential. The other thing to remember is there are two kinds of decisions. And the reason Jeff Bezos attributes this to a reason why Amazon is so successful company is that he divides decisions into two kinds. One kind is low impact decision, and the other one is high impact decision. He calls them one-way door decision or two-way door decision, right? Two-way door decision is the one that, okay, we went through the door, we look around, we don't like where we are, we can just take a step back, reverse the decision, everything is good, right? One-way door are bigger decisions, ones that are very difficult to reverse, ones that have the potential to, kill our team, kill our company. Like, for example, the company bets on a single product. This one-way door decision could be, for example, Disney decision to make the Snow White. Because if Snow White wasn't a hit that it was, we wouldn't have Disney now. The company would go completely bankrupt, right? And so it's worth only spending time on the high-impact decisions, and your teams are actually making very, very few of them. Very few. In the grand scheme of things, most of the decisions are those decisions that are non-lethal, two-way doors. So in this case, you just look for one thing. Is there a very important blocker for some solution? Like, can we do this solution that someone proposed? Is there like a big danger associated with it? No? Okay, we're going with it. Yes, there are risks, and some people on the team flag those risks, but they are not as big to block this decision. We just move on. And then, we check in 2 weeks, in a month, how this works. We check the metrics. And that's it. Decision made. We don't need to be in agreement that that's the best decision. Okay. Another important thing is confirmation bias. So there was a very nice slide with a hippo and data yesterday on the presentation. I don't know if you recall. On one side there was data, on the other side was hippo, and of course the hippo said, "Oh, we're going with my option, not the one that data indicates." But what hippos also have a tendency to do, and by hippo I mean every one of us, is we look for the data in a way that supports our assumption already in the brain. And I'll give you a story. So I was at an offsite, and the head of marketing was talking about the program that her team was doing for the customers, and she presented in the following way. All the customers that use this program spend on average twice as much with us than all other customers, right? And so the program must be great. Okay, and I asked her, okay, so how do you know that there's actually a causal relationship between the program and the amount of spend? She became very defensive, so did CEO, and they said, well, it's obvious, there's correlation, like this kind of stuff. But then head of sales said one very interesting thing. We only offer this marketing program to customers who already committed to spend more than $35,000 with us. So it means that there was a threshold below which, unless customer decided already to go with us, they will not get this program. And that was the reason why there was this situation where people who had this program were spending more money, because they already committed to it, and we gave this program extra to them, okay? And so we need to be very careful. And so what we do, we seek to disconfirm our beliefs, right? And we do it as soon as possible. So as soon as I have some idea, some approach, some thinking, and I need to verify it, I go to people who I know are most likely to disagree with me, and I ask them, okay, what do you think? Like, I think of it this way, what do you think? This is the right solution, or why not? And I get the feedback, right? And since one of the themes of this conference is the future of work and flood of organizations, Frederic Laloux actually identified this feedback process as the one of the most important processes in all organizations he analyzed that are, the future organizations. So let's do it, right? And then another mental check we need to do when we enter those conversations, and it's very easy to slip into, is that our goal is not to win an argument. Our goal is to actually choose the best solution for our customers, for our users, for our company, right? And it's very easy to slip into defending our own idea, right? Let's not do that. Let's not go that way. Let's be open to be challenged on what we think and what we assume is the truth. Okay. One more thing. Lifelong learning. So that's my personal, I guess, my personal passion. So one thing that I want to encourage you to do is to learn all the time, and not only just say, okay, I want to learn, but do it in a intentional way. In this way you will get best results in as shortest amount of time. So there are two techniques that I want to mention to you that I find particularly useful. So one technique is, if you see that there are people who do something very, very well and you would like to know how they do it, just learn from them. So intentionally look for people who do something very well that you would like to learn, and go and observe them, speak to them, and learn how they do it. So that's one. The other one is establish your learning goals. That's the one that I think the first person that actually proposed doing that was Benjamin Franklin. And he always set learning goals for himself. So I encourage everyone in my organization to do that. If they have, business goals, okay, we want to build features to achieve a certain retention of the users, for example. But apart from that, they have a goal. For example, to learn to negotiate, or to learn how to better delegate if there are managers, or other things. Whatever it is that they want to learn. They set their goals for a quarter or for half a year, and then they go back and they revisit and they check if they actually achieve those goals, right? And so with that, I want to say what is my success criteria for this presentation. I have been always reluctant to do presentations because in general research says that there's no effect on the audience. People actually don't change their behaviors. So I want to ask you, that's my personal request, that tonight, after you watched all the talks, you choose one thing that you're going to change, to actually implement. It may be, technology is easy, maybe it's something connected with the behavior, but just choose one that you're going to implement, you're going to introduce tomorrow when you're back in the office, right? And how you're going to test whether it works for you, okay? And in 3 months, you look back and you say, okay, I was inspired by something. I chose this thing after the conference, and I actually have done it. If one person in this audience does that, I think my presentation was worth it, okay? It was worth doing. All right, so that's my summary. So basically what I wanted to say is there is a great opportunity nowadays to move toward more autonomous organizations, right? In order to build them, and the only way that actually people who want to do it will be able to achieve this is if we adopt certain stances. So things like our responsibility, that we are subjects in our story, and the interdependence that is required to building those organizations is the only way they're going to happen. Okay, so I think that's it from me. Do you have some questions about what I said? No? Everyone is still reliving yesterday's night? Do you need time for this to sink in? I'll tell you one more story then, if there's no questions, because it's an important one and it's difficult to understand. So one more extremely important thing about interdependence and joint ownership is that we very often assume that we know what's going on in other person's head, and we want to protect them from certain things. So one example I'll give you about assuming is from my previous work when we had offices in Poland and in San Francisco. Overnight, an engineer in San Francisco would change some code, and the engineer in Poland would come to me and saying, "Oh, she changed my code that was so great, and she broke so many things, and she's mean to me. Why is she going there and like doing all this stupid stuff?" So the assumption there was that there is no rationale, that basically she did something like without thinking what she's doing, this engineer in San Francisco. So I said to that engineer in Poland, "Well, please wait until evening and ask what was the rationale for those changes, right? And see then if you disagree with them, and then I have like subject matter discussion. Maybe she didn't know some assumptions that you made, right? And her changes need to be reverted, or maybe you don't know something that she does. Okay? So that's one thing. We very often jump to conclusions that we know what's in other people's head. And I'll give you another story about it, slightly different, what it stops us from doing. So one time I spoke to a person who had problems with their manager. And they came to me and say, "Oh, I can't talk to my manager, right? I have this problem and that problem and that problem with him, right? And this is why." And I asked this person who came to me, "Okay, so have you described those problems to your manager as clearly as you just described them to me?" And they went silent for a moment, and they said, no, not in this way." Okay, so why don't we have a contract? You go to your manager, describe those issues that you have with them exactly in those same words that you described them to me, and see what the effect is. And then, if the effect is negative, you can't like reason as you assume that will happen with your manager, then ask them if they would be open for mediation, and ask me to mediate, or ask someone from your talent team to mediate between the two of you, and that will help, right? Okay, so he reluctantly agreed. He went to his manager. He said exactly in those same words that he said to me, very clearly and to the point, what problems he's got. And the manager said, "Oh my God, thanks for coming to me. I was thinking the same thing. Our relationship needs to be improved, and there are those issues. And yes, it's great that we can talk about it. I wanted to do it myself." So we assume that we know what's going in other people's head. Just be open and say, "Okay, I'm assuming that you're going to react negatively to it. So test it out. See if that actually happens." Okay, so now I'm really done, and I'm from Spartes, if anybody wants to join.